Chapter 1. Bright Lights.
Trisha pulled the throttle back. Taylor was beginning to slow down. "You okay?" she asked into her helmet. His voice came into her ear. "Yeah, my fuel meter's on E, but my bladder meter's on full," Taylor said, pulling off the exit. She didn't mind stopping, as she was feeling the miles they had traveled as well. This was her second time through the Utah landscape. Here in the southern part of the state, giant red spires and rocks peppered the landscape. Trisha shook her head, laughing at him. "That sounds like a good idea," she said, and they pulled into a dusty garage station on the edge of St. George, Utah. She looked around at the land again. She decided she liked Salt Lake better. It seemed almost barren out here. However, the amazing mountains that surrounded the Salt Lake Valley had already made a place in her heart. She looked over at Taylor, and he was staring off in the distance. "What are you thinking?" she asked him. They had used the bathroom and were filling the bike's empty tanks. Taylor looked back from the view. "Just trying to think of how to ask their parents," Taylor said, while stretching out his back. "Maybe you shouldn't," Trisha said. "What do you mean?" Taylor asked, looking confused. "We could just ask around. They must have some friends around here," Trisha replied. "I don't know," Taylor wondered. "Okay, whatever you think, honey," Trisha said with an evil grin on her face. "All right. Why am I wrong?" Taylor asked with a smirk on his face. Trisha smiled. "I love my parents a whole lot, but I'd never tell them I'd almost died and come back, and now I didn't know what the hell I was. They're looking for information. It's easier to go to your friends," Trisha pointed out. Taylor dropped his head. He looked up with a smile on his face. His hair tousled from his helmet. "You're right," he said very quietly. "What did you say?" Trisha laughed. "You're right," Taylor said, now with a full smile on his face. "Damn right, sucker," she said, with the most fierce and powerful face she could muster on him. "I always am, and I always will be." Taylor stuck his tongue out at her, and held it thus for quite a few minutes, till the gas was fully pumped, actually. They got back on the bikes, and Trisha rode a little behind Taylor. He made her laugh more than anything else, and it had been a long time since she had laughed as hard as she did with him. She would be hard-pressed to explain how she felt about Taylor. However, the thought of being without him now was unbearable. Taylor felt the same way for her. He had spent so much time alone that he had started to accept the fact that he would always be alone. When she had come into his life, that had all been dashed away. All his priorities and goals in life had been changed in an instant. Her eyes had went straight to his soul. He had known the second he saw her, she would change him forever. He smiled at the thought. He'd not have it any other way now. Taylor silently thanked Trisha's mom for the introduction. At this point, he did not know how far he would have made it without her. He knew that without her, he would not have accomplished half of what he had. Her faith in him gave him strength. Trisha had called her family the day before. She had not told them about being a vampire, but she had let them know that she was safe and not to believe the things they heard. She also let them know that Taylor and her may have to disappear soon. Her father worried that Taylor gotten her into that trouble. She assured him that first she had brought Taylor into the trouble, and second that Taylor had already saved her on more than one occasion. They of course wanted more details. Trisha told them she would tell them more as she could. They had grudgingly accepted it and let her go. One day she would tell them the whole story, she promised herself. They rode into town following Trisha's advice, and soon they were talking to one of Amy's friends. "She said they were heading to Vegas," the friend said. In fact, they heard Vegas 3 more times within just a few minutes. They walked back to their bikes, both of them solidly convinced that Las Vegas would be the next stop. "Don't even say it," Taylor said. "Say what?" Trisha asked, as innocently as she could. Taylor laughed. "You know." "You mean I shouldn't say anything about how very right about the friend thing?" Trisha said. "Is that what you don't want to hear about? How I was right?" Trisha added. "Yeah, that's pretty much it," Taylor replied. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be sure not to mention how right I was, okay?" Trisha said, laughing. "That's great. Thanks," Taylor grumbled, smiling at her the whole time. Within a few moments they were back on the freeway and completed the last leg to Las Vegas. By the time they pulled onto the strip, she couldn't help but giggle. They walked into the lush casino and up to the check-in desk. They got a room for the night. They rode the elevator up to their suite, and Trisha flopped down on the bed. Taylor mused a bit at their accommodations. They had gotten a high-end suite. Taylor felt a bit uncomfortable for two reasons. One, Taylor was not fully comfortable with the idea of spending Thoraine's money, and second, he was not used to the luxury. Trisha smiled on the bed and made kissy faces at Taylor. Taylor smiled and walked over. He leaned down and softly kissed her on the lips. "I love you," he said in a seductive whisper. Trisha got a wicked smile on her face. "You stink," Trisha said in a sweet voice. Taylor dropped his head on the bed in defeat. "Wow, you can kill a mood," Taylor said. Trisha laughed. "Sweetheart, it's a girl thing. We can all do it." Trisha smiled. "Smelly?" She smiled at him and started to laugh. Taylor got up and headed for the bathroom. Trisha looked out at the strip. The wicked grin returned, and she headed for the shower. In the middle of Taylor's shower, Trisha slipped in the water with him. She washed his body, and he returned the favor, and soon they were on the bed, not sleeping. She wrapped around him in passion, and their world, for a time, was just the two of them. No Scott, no Ashley, no war, just the two of them. After their rest, they got dressed. Night fell over the Las Vegas Strip, bringing out all manner of people. They headed down to the lobby and out into the street. The wave of heat hit them when they walked out of the door. They walked up the strip, trying to figure out their next move. They started looking out for other vampires to get information about Tiffany and Amy, and they stumbled into one vampire, but he knew nothing of Las Vegas. However, he had just heard this outrageous story that there'd been a huge vampire battle in Los Angeles. He spoke loud and fast. Taylor smiled as they spoke for a moment longer, both Taylor and Trisha doing everything they could not to burst out laughing. They walked down the street, and Trisha grabbed his hand. "If he only knew, huh?" Trisha said, smiling. "Knew what? I don't know what you're talking about," Taylor said, smiling. He let a fang pop out of his lip, and then he acted like he was trying to hide it. Trisha laughed. With him, she fit. They both felt like they belonged together. It had been a feeling both of them had drawn comfort from since he'd showed up on their doorstep in L.A. They were watching the fountain show at a casino. It was a romantic moment, and Taylor leaned in to kiss her. He, however, stopped short. He felt vampires around him. There was 3 of them, and it looked like they were fairly new to their change. Taylor walked over to them. Trisha followed, grumbling something about bad timing. They felt a wave of power as Taylor approached. Their eyes grew large, and Trisha laughed. "You have quite an effect, Taylor," Trisha giggled as they got close. Taylor winked at her. "I had that before I was a vampire." "Wow, you're humble, too," she said, laughing. Taylor gave a smile, and they walked over to the 3. "Salutations," one of the girl vampires said. She had a smile on her face. They looked Taylor up and down. All 3 of them were a tad disappointed that Trisha was with him. Trisha caught the looks and smiled. "Hey, how's it going?" Taylor asked. "We are looking for some friends. Any advice you can offer?" Taylor asked. "Yeah, she stammered. They were in awe of his power. "Jean-Pierre, he can get you anything you want," she replied. She gave him the direction to head, and then she mustered up all her courage to ask the questions that played at all their minds. Can we ask you something?" she asked, and Taylor nodded yes. "You guys are so powerful. How?" she asked. "Go to L.A. You'll find out soon enough," Trisha replied, smiling. They left the 3 girls standing on the street. They were already planning a trip to L.A. Trisha and Taylor walked up a couple of blocks, and they entered the casino the girl had pointed them to for Jean-Pierre. They spoke to the front desk. After mentioning the name Jean-Pierre, the lady at the desk made a phone call. Right after she hung up, they were escorted to an elevator. Soon they were riding that elevator up to Jean-Pierre's private suite. The doors opened to a lavish suite, done in reds and golds. It felt gaudy and crass. However, when they saw their host, they knew why. "Welcome to Las Vegas," he smiled. "We have everything you can desire." He wore a large red robe, also accented in gold. "I'm sure you do," Trisha said bluntly, trying not to roll her eyes at the vampire. He reminded her of Darius. She held back comments that she had let fly at Darius about Jean-Pierre's stereotypical vampire dress. "We're looking for my friends, Tiffany and Amy." Taylor would have continued, but stopped because he saw Jean-Pierre's face drop. "I apologize. I did not know they had friends. I have been taking care of them," he said, and called over an assistant. The assistant scurried off as fast as he could. Taylor seemed to trust him, but Trisha had an odd feeling about him. She wondered if it was just because of the similarities to Darius that made him question him, or was it something more? Taylor could feel that Jean-Pierre was afraid of him, but that was not a new feeling for him, so he paid little attention to it. Jean-Pierre assured him that Tiffany and Amy would be on their way momentarily. He offered them drinks, but neither accepted, choosing to wait standing. The longer Trisha spent around Jean-Pierre, the more uncomfortable she became. There is something about him that just did not sit right with her. 30 minutes later, in anguish, Tiffany and Amy walked into the room. They both looked around the room and spotted Taylor and ran to him. They both hugged Taylor. "You okay?" Taylor inquired. "No," Amy said. "What the hell is happening to us?" She finished, tears streaking down her face. "I'll explain. Let's get out of here," Taylor said. "Thank you, Jean-Pierre," Taylor said, and they walked toward the door. "Oh, my friends, you are most welcome. Please let me know if you need anything else," he said with a grand bow, and led them to the door. Within moments, they were in a cab to their own hotel. They went up to their suite. Tiffany and Amy just rested in peace that they were safe. Taylor sat with them, looking out to the lights of the city. Trisha walked out and handed Tiffany a joint. "It'll help. Trust me," she smiled. Not the way she had expected to meet such an important person in Taylor's life. Trisha had heard so much about the three friends, she felt as she knew them before they had even met. She longed to hug the two and tell them it'd be all right, but she decided for now she would do what she could to follow Taylor's lead. Tiffany took a hit and passed it to Amy. She took a hit, but it was plain to see on her face that she wanted answers. "You need to know it's all going to be all right. I'm sure you have heard and figured out stuff here and there, but you need to know the whole story," Taylor said. He told them what they were. He told them what had happened. He let them know everything that had happened to Scott and himself. To say they were in shock would not accurately describe their thoughts. Tiffany and Amy were quiet for about an hour. Taylor offered a word here and there, but knew that this was something they would have to come to grip with on their own. "Can he beat the bloodlust now?" Tiffany asked. Even in the middle of the haze of being turned into a vampire, she was still fully focused on Scott. "I don't know, but I do know Scott, and I think he can do it," Taylor said with the most confidence he could muster. "And who is this?" Amy said, pointing to Trisha. "Oh, I'm sorry. This is Trisha. She's my girlfriend," Taylor said. Amy smiled. "Well, it's about time," Amy said, and gave Trisha a hug. "I've heard so much about you," Trisha said, smiling. "Yeah, I think you have us beat there," Amy replied. Taylor told them the story of how he had met Trisha, along with the story of everything that had happened in L.A. Taylor and Trisha tried to offer what comfort they could. However, neither of them felt it was helping at all. Trisha had been converted in much the same manner, but because the friends she had made so quickly, she at least had part of the story very quickly. Tiffany and Amy had been left with no information. They had known they'd been changed, but no idea how. Throughout the night, they went through every emotion. Taylor tried to offer comfort, but in the end, all either him or Trisha could do was offer shoulders to cry on. Finally, around 2 in the morning, Tiffany and Amy fell asleep. Taylor watched them sleep peacefully for a while, and then he walked out to the balcony of the suite. Taylor sat on the balcony looking over the city. The Strip glittered in front of him. Trisha slipped next to him. "I can't even imagine," Taylor breathed. "Well, it's a shock, but they'll get through it. Anyone can see they're strong enough," Trisha said. She slipped under his arm and they watched the Strip.